Hey everyone! Tonight we embark on a journey through one of the most brilliant and terrifying military minds the galaxy has ever known. Grand Admiral Thrawn, the blue-skinned genius who nearly brought the New Republic to its knees through the ancient art of understanding his enemies. This is the complete story of how a single alien tactician, armed with nothing but art galleries and cultural studies, came closer to restoring the Empire than any Death Star ever could. So before we dive into this epic tale, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel, but only if you genuinely enjoy these galactic bedtime stories. I notice that about 86% of you wonderful viewers who watch these videos regularly haven't hit that subscribe button yet. Your subscription truly helps this channel grow and brings more of these peaceful Star Wars tales to fellow fans seeking rest among the stars. And if you find yourself drawn to the intrigue and mystery of other legendary worlds, I invite you to visit my new channel The Raven's Tales, where we explore the dark mysteries and forgotten legends of Westeros. The link awaits you in the description below. Please share in the comments where you're listening from tonight, and what time it is in your corner of the galaxy. I'm genuinely curious to know how our community spans across different time zones and continents. Now dim those lights. Settle into your most comfortable position and prepare yourself for a tale that begins in the shadowed depths of space, where legends are born from the ashes of fallen empires. Picture, if you will, the bridge of a massive Imperial Star Destroyer drifting silently through the void of the unknown regions. The ship's hull bears scars from countless battles, yet its corridors hum with renewed purpose. In the captain's quarters, surrounded by holographic displays of alien artwork, stands a figure whose very presence seems to bend reality around his strategic mind. His skin glows with an ethereal blue radiance in the dim lighting. His eyes, red as dying stars, study a three-dimensional tactical display showing the core worlds of the New Republic. But he is not looking at military installations or fleet positions. Instead, his attention focuses entirely on a delicate sculpture from Alderaan, its crystalline forms catching the light like frozen tears. Captain Pellaeon, the figure speaks, his voice carrying the weight of empires yet unborn. Observe how the artist captured the essence of hope in this piece. See how the curves suggest eternal optimism, how the material itself refuses to acknowledge the possibility of destruction. The human captain approaches cautiously, uncertain where this artistic analysis leads. This, my dear Pellaeon, tells us everything we need to know about how Princess Leia will respond to our next move. Art never lies about the soul of a people, and souls once understood become remarkably predictable. The blue-skinned admiral turns from the holographic display, and for the first time in 5 years since the Emperor's death, the Empire has found something far more dangerous than any weapon. It has found its true heir. The first sign that something fundamental had shifted in the galactic balance came not through military intelligence or diplomatic channels, but through the dreams of a Jedi. Luke Skywalker awakened in his modest chambers on Coruscant with the taste of copper in his mouth and visions of tactical brilliance dancing behind his closed eyes. The Force had shown him glimpses of a mind so calculating, so methodical in its approach to warfare, that it seemed almost mechanical in its precision. Yet there was something organic about this intelligence, something that understood the ebb and flow of living cultures in ways that no droid or computer ever could. In his meditation that morning, Luke reached out through the Force, seeking the source of these disturbing visions. What he touched was not the familiar chaos of the dark side, but something far more unsettling, a consciousness that viewed the galaxy as a vast canvas upon which to paint victory through understanding rather than mere brutality. Meanwhile, in the Senate chambers of the New Republic, Princess Leia found herself facing reports that defied conventional military analysis. Imperial attacks across 3 sectors had occurred simultaneously, each strike perfectly timed to exploit weaknesses that the Republic military had not even realized existed. The coordination required for such precision suggested a level of strategic planning that the fractured Imperial remnants should not have possessed. Admiral Akbar's tactical briefings painted a picture of an enemy that seemed to anticipate every Republic countermove before it was even conceived. Ship formations that had proven successful against previous Imperial warlords were being systematically dismantled by forces that appeared to understand not just Republic military doctrine, but the psychological tendencies of individual Republic commanders. The Mon Calamari Admiral's large eyes reflected genuine concern as he addressed the assembled senators. Each Imperial victory had been achieved with minimal casualties on both sides, suggesting a commander who valued efficiency over the traditional Imperial approach of overwhelming force. This was not the work of some power-hungry warlord seeking to carve out a personal domain. This was the methodology of someone rebuilding the Empire itself. Han Solo's reaction to these developments was characteristically direct. While politicians debated the implications of coordinated Imperial attacks, he took the Millennium Falcon into the space lanes to gather intelligence from sources that no government official could access. The underworld had its own networks of information, and smugglers often knew about military movements long before official channels reported them. What Han discovered in the cantinas and freight-loading docks of the Outer Rim painted an even more disturbing picture. Imperial forces were not simply attacking Republic installations, they were studying them. Captured personnel reported interrogations that focused not on military secrets, but on cultural preferences, artistic traditions, and the social customs of their homeworlds. One freed Republic pilot described being questioned for hours about the architectural styles of his home planet, the popular music of his generation, and the storytelling traditions of his family. The Imperial officers conducting these interviews had shown more interest in his planet's art museums than in its defensive capabilities. It was as if the Empire had developed some new form of psychological warfare that operated on principles no Republic strategist could comprehend. The pattern became clearer when Leia's diplomatic contacts began reporting similar incidents across multiple star systems. Imperial agents were systematically acquiring cultural artifacts, purchasing art collections, and accessing historical databases with a focus on aesthetic and cultural materials rather than military intelligence. Someone was building the most comprehensive library of galactic cultural knowledge ever assembled. In the quiet moments between official briefings, Luke shared his Force visions with his sister. The images that came to him in meditation showed endless galleries filled with artistic treasures from across the galaxy, but these were not the collections of some aesthetic enthusiast. Each piece was catalogued, analyzed, and cross-referenced with tactical data in ways that suggested a mind capable of finding military applications for cultural understanding. The siblings recognized that they were facing an entirely new type of Imperial threat. Previous enemies had relied on fear, overwhelming firepower, or dark-side corruption to achieve their goals. This new adversary appeared to be using something far more sophisticated. Knowledge itself had become a weapon, and the Empire's mysterious new leader was wielding it with surgical precision. Captain Pellion's personal logs from this period, later recovered by Republic intelligence, revealed the perspective from within the Imperial camp. The career officer found himself serving under a commander whose methods challenged everything he thought he understood about military strategy. Thrawn's briefings often began with discussions of poetry or sculpture before moving into tactical analysis. The Grand Admiral would display holographic representations of enemy artwork alongside star charts, explaining how the emotional expressions captured in alien sculptures revealed the decision-making patterns of their military leaders. A species that favored flowing, organic forms in their art could be predicted to employ flexible, adaptive battle tactics. Cultures that created rigid, geometrically precise monuments would likely favor disciplined, hierarchical command structures that could be exploited through targeted strikes at command vessels. What amazed Pelion was not just the accuracy of these predictions, but the speed with which Thrawn could analyze new cultural data and translate it into actionable military intelligence. The Grand Admiral could observe a single piece of artwork and within hours develop comprehensive strategies for defeating the civilization that created it. It was as if he possessed some innate ability to read the collective unconscious of entire species through their creative expressions. The Imperial fleet under Thrawn's command began to move with a coordination that had been absent since the Emperor's death. Each ship captain received detailed briefings not just on tactical objectives, but on the cultural psychology of their intended targets. They learned to recognize the artistic signatures that would reveal enemy weak points and to use cultural knowledge as a form of psychological warfare. Republic forces found themselves facing opponents who seemed to understand their own motivations better than they did. Imperial commanders would broadcast cultural references that resonated with specific Republic crews, using knowledge of their homeworld traditions to create confusion and hesitation at crucial moments. It was warfare conducted on a level that transcended mere military tactics. Luke's Jedi training had prepared him for many forms of conflict, but not for an enemy who treated battle as a form of artistic expression. The Force showed him glimpses of Thrawn's strategic planning sessions, where the Grand Admiral would study holographic battle formations as if they were sculptures, adjusting troop movements with the same careful attention that a master artist might give to brushstrokes on a canvas. The realization gradually dawned on the Republic leadership that they were not simply facing another Imperial warlord seeking to restore the old regime through brute force. They were confronting a mind that had studied the fundamental nature of galactic civilization and found ways to use that knowledge as the ultimate strategic advantage. Every planet's history, every species' cultural heritage, every artistic tradition that had ever flourished in the galaxy had become potential ammunition in Thrawn's methodical campaign to restore Imperial order. As reports continued to arrive from across the galaxy, a pattern emerged that chilled even the most optimistic Republic leaders. The Empire had found something more dangerous than any superweapon, more insidious than any dark side corruption, and more effective than any military technology. It had found a leader who understood that the key to conquering the galaxy lay not in destroying its cultures, but in comprehending them so completely that resistance became futile. The journey into this new form of galactic conflict had begun, and the Republic would need to develop entirely new strategies to face an enemy who had turned knowledge itself into the most powerful weapon in the galaxy. The war for the future of galactic civilization would be fought not just with starships and lightsabers, but with the very essence of what made each species unique. In the depths of space, among star systems whose names appeared on no Republic charts, Grand Admiral Thrawn continued his patient study of the galaxy's soul, preparing to use that knowledge to reshape the political landscape according to his vision of order and stability. The Empire's true heir had revealed himself, and the galaxy would never be the same. The breakthrough in understanding their mysterious adversary came through an unexpected source, Talon Karrde, the information broker who had inherited much of Jabba the Hutt's intelligence network, made contact with Republic leadership through channels so subtle that even his own organization remained unaware of the communication. His message was brief but urgent. The Imperial remnants had found a leader whose tactical capabilities defied conventional analysis. Karrde's informants throughout the galaxy had been reporting unusual Imperial requisitions for months. Rather than the typical demands for weapons, ships, and military supplies, these new orders focused on cultural artifacts, historical databases, and artistic collections. Entire museum contents were being purchased through intermediaries. Academic institutions were receiving generous funding for archaeological expeditions, and private collectors found themselves approached by mysterious buyers willing to pay extraordinary sums for pieces that seemed to have no strategic value. The information brokers network had traced these acquisitions to a pattern of Imperial fleet movements in sectors that should have held no military significance. Worlds known primarily for their cultural heritage, artistic achievements, or historical importance were receiving visits from Imperial survey teams. These expeditions conducted detailed scans of archaeological sites, recorded comprehensive databases of local artistic traditions, and compiled extensive files on the psychological and cultural characteristics of indigenous populations. What disturbed Kade most was the systematic nature of this cultural intelligence gathering. The Imperial forces were not collecting information randomly, but following a comprehensive methodology that suggested someone with an unprecedented understanding of how cultural knowledge could be weaponized. Every acquisition seemed designed to build a complete psychological profile of galactic civilization. Republic intelligence analysts, working with data provided by Kade's organization, began to map the scope of this cultural espionage operation. The results painted a picture of preparation so thorough and methodical that it suggested years of planning. Someone had been studying the galaxy's diverse civilizations with the patience and precision of a master strategist who understood that knowledge of enemy psychology was more valuable than knowledge of their military capabilities. The first direct encounter with this new Imperial methodology occurred during the Republic's investigation of attacks on convoy routes in the Corellian system. A joint task force led by General Han Solo and accompanied by Luke Skywalker arrived to find Imperial forces that demonstrated an uncanny ability to predict Republic tactical responses with almost supernatural accuracy. What made these engagements particularly unnerving was the Imperial commander's apparent knowledge of individual Republic officers' personal histories and psychological profiles. Tactical communications intercepted by Republic forces included references to specific commanders' homeworld traditions, family backgrounds, and even childhood experiences that could not have been obtained through conventional intelligence gathering. Commander Wedge Antilles reported that Imperial forces seemed to anticipate his squadron's maneuvers based on what appeared to be knowledge of Corellian pilot training traditions and cultural attitudes toward risk and authority. The enemy demonstrated understanding not just of Republic military doctrine, but of the cultural psychology that influenced how that doctrine was interpreted and implemented by officers from different worlds. Luke's force sensitivity provided additional insights into the nature of their opponent. During combat encounters, he perceived something unprecedented in the Imperial tactical formations. The movements of enemy ships followed patterns that felt almost artistic in their precision and beauty. There was an aesthetic quality to the enemy's strategic thinking that suggested a mind capable of finding harmony between warfare and cultural expression. The Jedi's attempts to sense the Imperial commander's intentions through the Force met with partial success. He could perceive fragments of a consciousness that approached battle planning with the same methodical care that a master artist might bring to creating a sculpture. Each tactical decision seemed to be evaluated not only for its military effectiveness, but for its elegance and its demonstration of superior understanding of enemy psychology. These encounters revealed that the Republic was facing an adversary who had developed an entirely new form of warfare based on cultural and psychological analysis. Traditional military strategies that had proven effective against previous Imperial forces were being systematically countered by an enemy who seemed to understand the cultural foundations that shaped Republic tactical thinking. Republic military leaders found themselves questioning assumptions that had guided galactic warfare for generations. The effectiveness of specific formations, the reliability of established protocols, and even the predictability of their own decision-making processes were being challenged by an opponent who appeared to have studied galactic military psychology with unprecedented thoroughness. Princess Leia's diplomatic experience provided additional perspective on the enemy's capabilities. Her contacts throughout the galaxy reported that Imperial agents were conducting what appeared to be sociological research rather than traditional espionage. These operatives showed more interest in understanding local customs, artistic preferences, and social hierarchies than in gathering intelligence about military installations or political secrets. The scope of this cultural investigation became apparent when Republic forces discovered an abandoned Imperial research facility on a world in the Outer Rim. The installation contained databases that cataloged artistic traditions, psychological profiles, and cultural characteristics of hundreds of species throughout the galaxy. The level of detail in these files exceeded anything in the Republic's own cultural archives. Each species profile included comprehensive analyses of artistic expressions, with detailed explanations of how cultural values influenced military tactics, political decision-making, and individual psychology. The files revealed a systematic effort to understand the fundamental drives and motivations that shaped the behavior of galactic civilization at every level. What disturbed Republic analysts most was the practical application of this cultural knowledge. The databases included tactical recommendations for exploiting the psychological weaknesses of specific species, strategies for using cultural references to create confusion and hesitation in enemy forces, and methods for predicting the behavior of military commanders based on their cultural backgrounds. The Imperial Research Facility also contained evidence of extensive communication with archaeological teams, anthropological researchers, and cultural historians throughout the galaxy. Someone had been funding a comprehensive survey of galactic civilization disguised as academic research, building the most complete understanding of galactic psychology ever assembled. Captain Pelian's encrypted communications, intercepted by Republic intelligence, provided glimpses into the Imperial perspective on these operations. The career officer expressed amazement at his commander's ability to derive military advantages from cultural knowledge that seemed completely unrelated to warfare. Art collections were being used to develop psychological profiles of enemy species, historical studies were being translated into tactical doctrine, and cultural anthropology was being weaponized in ways that no previous military theorist had ever conceived. The Grand Admiral's briefings, as described in Pelian's reports, demonstrated a level of cultural sophistication that challenged conventional understanding of military leadership. Thrawn would analyze enemy artwork to predict the tactical preferences of their military commanders, study architectural styles to understand defensive psychology, and examine literary traditions to anticipate how different species would respond to various forms of psychological pressure. This methodology was producing results that exceeded traditional military analysis in both accuracy and scope. Imperial forces under Thrawn's command were achieving victory ratios that seemed impossible based on their numerical disadvantage and limited resources. They were accomplishing through superior understanding what previous Imperial leaders had attempted through overwhelming force. The Republic began to realize that they were facing an opponent who had elevated warfare to the level of high art, treating each engagement as an opportunity to demonstrate superior knowledge of galactic civilization. This was not the crude brutality of Sith Lords or the technological terror of superweapons, but something far more sophisticated and potentially more dangerous. The enemy's success in translating cultural knowledge into military advantage suggested a level of strategic thinking that operated on principles unknown to Republic military doctrine. Traditional concepts of tactics, strategy, and warfare were being redefined by an adversary who understood that the key to victory lay not in superior firepower, but in superior comprehension of enemy psychology. As the scope of the Imperial Cultural Intelligence operation became clear, Republic leaders recognized that they were confronting a form of warfare that could potentially render traditional military responses ineffective. An enemy who understood galactic civilization better than its own inhabitants could exploit weaknesses that conventional military analysis would never identify. The journey into this new realm of conflict had revealed the outline of an opponent whose capabilities transcended conventional understanding of military leadership. Somewhere in the unknown regions, a mind of unprecedented analytical power was preparing to use the galaxy's own cultural heritage as a weapon against the freedom and diversity that the Republic sought to protect. The true test of this new form of warfare was yet to come, but already the Republic faced the unsettling realization that their enemy might understand them better than they understood themselves. The Republic's initial assessment of their new imperial adversary reflected the comfortable assumptions of a government that had grown accustomed to victory. Chief of State Mon Mothma convened emergency sessions of the Provisional Council with confidence that the coordinated imperial attacks represented nothing more than a temporary resurgence under yet another ambitious warlord seeking to establish a personal power base in the chaos following the Emperor's death. Intelligence reports from across the galaxy were interpreted through the lens of previous encounters with imperial remnants. The cultural acquisitions and artistic databases were dismissed as the eccentric hobbies of a commander attempting to establish legitimacy through displays of sophistication. The systematic nature of the enemy's cultural research was viewed as evidence of obsessive personality traits rather than revolutionary military methodology. Admiral Akbar, despite his growing unease, found himself presenting analyses that minimized the threat posed by the mysterious imperial leader. The Mon Calamari's strategic assessments emphasized the numerical superiority of Republic forces and the technological advantages gained through captured imperial equipment. His briefings focused on conventional military factors while downplaying the significance of the enemy's unprecedented cultural intelligence operations. The prevailing theory among Republic military leaders was that the Imperial commander's reliance on cultural analysis revealed a fundamental weakness in his strategic thinking. An adversary who spent more time studying art than military tactics was assumed to be compensating for inadequate understanding of conventional warfare. The enemy's apparent obsession with alien cultures was interpreted as evidence that non-human leadership would ultimately prove ineffective in commanding human imperial forces. Republic strategists developed countermeasures based on the assumption that cultural knowledge could not substitute for traditional military experience. They prepared defensive formations designed to exploit what they perceived as the enemy's over-reliance on psychological manipulation rather than direct confrontation. The Republic's response strategy emphasized rapid, decisive engagements that would prevent the Imperial commander from implementing his elaborate cultural analysis before being overwhelmed by superior numbers. This confident assessment seemed to be validated by early engagements where Republic forces achieved tactical successes against Imperial formations. Several convoy escort missions concluded without significant losses, and defensive actions at key installations demonstrated the continued effectiveness of established Republic military doctrine. Intelligence analysts interpreted these results as confirmation that the enemy's cultural methodology was indeed more impressive in theory than in practical application. Princess Leia's diplomatic corps contributed to this optimistic evaluation by reporting that many Imperial officers appeared uncomfortable with their new commander's unconventional methods. Intercepted communications suggested growing tensions within Imperial ranks between traditional military professionals and the alien leader's innovative approaches to warfare. The assumption developed that the Empire's human personnel would eventually reject non-human command, leading to internal conflicts that would weaken Imperial effectiveness. The Republic's confidence was further reinforced by assessments of the Imperial fleet's material capabilities. Despite the enemy's tactical innovations, their forces remained limited in numbers and constrained by the same logistical challenges that had plagued other Imperial remnants. Republic analysts calculated that sustained military pressure would eventually exhaust the enemy's resources regardless of their strategic sophistication. Luke Skywalker found himself questioning these optimistic conclusions, though he struggled to articulate his concerns in terms that military planners could understand. His force-enhanced perceptions suggested depths to the enemy's capabilities that were not reflected in conventional intelligence reports. The fragments of consciousness he touched during meditation conveyed a sense of patient confidence that seemed inconsistent with the desperate ambitions typically displayed by Imperial warlords. The Jedi's attempts to share these concerns were met with polite acknowledgement but little practical consideration. Military leaders appreciated Luke's unique insights, but they remained focused on measurable factors like fleet strengths, territorial control, and resource availability. The subtle warnings conveyed through Force visions were difficult to translate into the concrete terms required for strategic planning. Han Solo's contacts in the galactic underworld provided a different perspective that also failed to penetrate the Republic's confident assessments. Smugglers and information brokers reported increasing Imperial activity in sectors that held no apparent strategic value, suggesting a level of preparation that exceeded what would be necessary for the limited campaigns that Republic analysts anticipated. However, these reports were dismissed as the inevitable exaggerations that characterized underworld intelligence networks. The first significant challenge to the Republic's comfortable assumptions came through Talon Karda's organization. Though even this information was initially misinterpreted, Karda's operatives reported that Imperial forces were acquiring cultural artifacts with a focus and urgency that suggested immediate tactical applications rather than long-term academic interest. The information broker's analysis indicated that someone was building practical military applications for cultural knowledge at a pace that exceeded pure scholarly research. Yet Republic intelligence continued to frame these activities within the context of psychological warfare, rather than recognizing them as components of a comprehensive strategic methodology. The prevailing interpretation was that the Imperial commander was attempting to demoralize Republic forces through displays of cultural sophistication, using artistic knowledge as a form of propaganda rather than as genuine military intelligence. Captain Pelian's perspective during this period, later revealed through recovered Imperial records, demonstrated the contrast between Republic assumptions and Imperial reality. The career officer had initially shared some skepticism about his new commander's unconventional methods, but his doubts were being systematically dispelled by the practical results of Thrawn's cultural analysis. Pelian's private communications described briefings where the Grand Admiral would predict specific tactical decisions by Republic commanders based on their cultural backgrounds and psychological profiles. These predictions proved accurate with disturbing consistency, suggesting that the Imperial leader's methodology was producing genuine strategic advantages rather than mere psychological effects. The Imperial captain witnessed tactical planning sessions where cultural artifacts were used to develop battle strategies with mathematical precision. Thrawn's analysis of Republic artwork revealed patterns in decision-making that could be exploited through carefully timed maneuvers and psychological pressure. The Grand Admiral's cultural studies were producing actionable military intelligence that exceeded the effectiveness of traditional espionage networks. However, the Republic remained unaware of these developments, interpreting Imperial successes as fortunate coincidences rather than systematic achievements. The comfortable assumption persisted that alien leadership would ultimately prove inadequate for the complex challenges of military command, despite accumulating evidence that suggested otherwise. Republic confidence was further reinforced by successful intelligence operations that revealed apparent weaknesses in Imperial organization. Several captured Imperial officers expressed doubts about their non-human commanders' ability to understand human motivations and cultural nuances. These reports seem to confirm that the enemy's cultural analysis methodology contained fundamental limitations that would eventually be exploited. The assessment that emerged from these early encounters painted a picture of an Imperial leader whose innovative methods were impressive, but ultimately limited by the inherent challenges of cross-species command. Republic strategists anticipated that sustained pressure would reveal the practical limitations of cultural analysis when applied to actual military operations against experienced opponents. This evaluation seemed particularly reasonable, given the Republic's advantages in personnel, resources, and territorial control. The mathematical realities of galactic warfare appeared to favor the side with greater numbers and better logistics, regardless of tactical sophistication. Republic planners calculated that the Imperial commander's cultural methodology, however innovative, could not overcome these fundamental strategic disadvantages. The false confidence generated by these assessments would prove costly as the conflict developed, but for the moment, Republic leadership felt justified in maintaining existing strategic priorities rather than fundamentally restructuring their approach to counter an enemy they believed they understood. The comfortable illusion persisted that conventional military thinking would ultimately prevail over unconventional methods, despite growing evidence that they were facing an opponent who operated according to principles they had yet to comprehend. In the depths of space, Grand Admiral Thrawn continued his patient preparation, allowing the Republic to maintain their misconceptions while he gathered the cultural intelligence necessary to demonstrate the true scope of his strategic capabilities. The Empire's most dangerous weapon remained hidden behind the facade of academic curiosity, waiting for the moment when superior understanding would be revealed in its full devastating effectiveness. The stage was set for confrontations that would challenge every assumption the Republic had made about the nature of military leadership and the relationship between cultural knowledge and strategic power. The Republic's first genuine glimpse into the scope of their adversaries' preparations came through an archaeological discovery that would reshape their understanding of Imperial capabilities. On the remote world of Wayland, nestled within a mountain called Mount Tantis, Republic forces uncovered evidence of secret Imperial installations that had operated continuously since the Clone Wars era, hidden from galactic awareness through decades of political upheaval. Luke Skywalker's investigation of the facility revealed chambers that stretched deep into the planet's core, filled with technology that exceeded anything previously associated with Imperial research programs. The installations contained vast storage areas housing artifacts from civilizations across the galaxy, collected and catalogued with obsessive precision. Each item was accompanied by detailed analysis files that examined not only historical significance, but practical applications for psychological manipulation and strategic planning. The mountain facility represented more than mere storage space for cultural treasures. It functioned as a comprehensive research center where teams of Imperial scientists, historians, and psychologists had spent years developing methodologies for translating cultural knowledge into military advantage. The scope of the operation suggested preparation for campaigns that would span decades rather than the limited engagements typical of Imperial warlords. Deep within the mountain's protected chambers, Republic investigators discovered cloning technology that surpassed anything previously encountered in galactic history. The Sparty cloning cylinders found within Mount Tantis represented technological achievement that made the Clone Wars era equipment seem primitive by comparison. These devices could produce fully mature beings in a fraction of the time required by earlier cloning methods, with psychological conditioning that ensured absolute loyalty to Imperial ideals. The facility's cloning operations were supported by genetic databases that contained samples from Force-sensitive individuals collected throughout the galaxy's history. Imperial researchers had been systematically gathering biological material from Jedi, Sith, and other Force users, apparently preparing to create armies of artificially enhanced warriors whose abilities would exceed those of naturally born Force sensitives. Princess Leia's analysis of the facility's records revealed connections to archaeological expeditions that had been funded through seemingly legitimate academic institutions. The Imperial operation had been financing research projects across the galaxy under the cover of scholarly interest, using university departments and museum acquisitions to build comprehensive databases of cultural and psychological information about every major civilization. The mountain installation also contained evidence of communication networks that connected to similar facilities throughout the unknown regions. Mount Tantis was not an isolated research station, but part of a comprehensive infrastructure designed to support long-term strategic operations on a galactic scale. The Empire had been preparing for eventual resurgence with thoroughness that exceeded anything imagined by Republican leadership. Han Solo's exploration of the facility's lower levels uncovered storage areas containing artworks and cultural artifacts that represented billions of credits in value and centuries of galactic cultural heritage. The collection included pieces from worlds that had been destroyed during the Imperial era, preserving cultural knowledge that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. However, these treasures were not being preserved for their historical value, but catalogued for their strategic applications. Each artifact in the collection was accompanied by analysis files that examined the psychological implications of the culture that created it. Imperial researchers had developed techniques for using knowledge of artistic preferences to predict political decisions, military tactics, and individual behavior patterns. The facility represented the transformation of cultural appreciation into a form of warfare that operated on levels beyond conventional military understanding. The Republic forces investigating Mount Tantiss discovered that the facility's operations were coordinated with other Imperial installations throughout the galaxy. Communication logs revealed regular data exchanges with research stations in the corporate sector, archaeological teams in the Outer Rim, and cultural institutions in the core worlds. The scope of Imperial cultural intelligence gathering exceeded anything that Republican intelligence agencies had achieved. Luke's force sensitivity provided additional insights into the nature of the mountain facility's purpose. The structure itself seemed designed to amplify and focus dark side energies, creating an environment where Imperial researchers could conduct experiments that required connection to the Force's destructive aspects. The combination of advanced technology and dark side manipulation suggested capabilities that transcended conventional understanding of scientific research. The Jedi's exploration of the facility's deepest chambers revealed meditation areas where Imperial Force users had been conducting research into psychological manipulation techniques. These areas contained databases of mental conditioning methods developed through experiments on captured Republic personnel. The Imperial operation had been systematically studying techniques for breaking individual will and replacing personal loyalty with devotion to Imperial ideals. Captain Pelian's communications during this period, intercepted through Republic intelligence operations, revealed that Mount Tantiss was only one component of a larger network of Imperial research facilities. The Grand Admiral's forces were coordinating activities across multiple installations, each specializing in different aspects of cultural and psychological analysis. The distributed nature of the operation made it resistant to disruption through conventional military action. The mountain facility's research programs included studies of species-specific psychological vulnerabilities that could be exploited through targeted propaganda and misinformation campaigns. Imperial researchers had identified techniques for using cultural symbols and historical references to create confusion and demoralization among enemy populations. The facility represented warfare conducted at levels that affected entire civilizations rather than merely military forces. Republic analysts studying the Mount Tantiss discovery began to understand that their adversary's cultural methodology was supported by decades of systematic research and preparation. The Imperial commander's apparent ability to predict enemy behavior was not based on intuitive genius, but on comprehensive databases of psychological and cultural analysis that exceeded anything previously assembled in galactic history. The facility's records revealed that Imperial researchers had been studying the effectiveness of different forms of psychological warfare against specific species and cultures. They had developed techniques for exploiting religious beliefs, cultural taboos, and historical traumas to achieve strategic objectives without direct military confrontation. The scope of this research suggested enemy capabilities that extended far beyond conventional military threats. Talon Karda's organization provided additional intelligence about Imperial operations that connected to the Mount Tantiss facility. Information brokers throughout the galaxy reported increasing Imperial interest in acquiring cultural artifacts and historical documents that seemed to have no immediate strategic value. However, the discovery of the mountain installation revealed that these acquisitions were components of systematic intelligence gathering rather than random collecting. The Republic's investigation of Mount Tantiss also uncovered evidence of Imperial experiments in force manipulation that combined technology with dark side techniques. The facility contained laboratories where researchers had been developing methods for artificially enhancing force sensitivity and creating technological devices that could channel force energies. These experiments suggested that the Empire was attempting to industrialize force abilities in ways that would make them available to non-force sensitive personnel. The mountain facility's communication systems revealed that Imperial forces were receiving regular updates on cultural and political developments throughout the galaxy. The enemy's intelligence network was monitoring not only military activities but social movements, artistic trends, and cultural changes that could affect long-term strategic planning. The scope of Imperial surveillance capabilities exceeded anything that Republic security services had achieved. The discovery of Mount Tantiss forced Republic leadership to reconsider their assumptions about the enemy they faced. The facility represented preparation for campaigns that would span generations rather than the limited objectives typically associated with Imperial warlords. The combination of advanced technology, comprehensive cultural research, and systematic psychological analysis suggested adversary capabilities that transcended conventional military threats. The mountain installation's research programs included development of techniques for manipulating galactic media and communication networks to achieve strategic objectives through information warfare. Imperial researchers had been studying methods for using cultural preferences and psychological vulnerabilities to influence public opinion and political decision-making on a galactic scale. As Republic forces completed their investigation of the facility, they realized that Mount Tantiss represented only a fraction of the enemy's true capabilities. The installation was designed to support operations that would reshape galactic civilization according to Imperial vision, using cultural knowledge and psychological manipulation to achieve objectives that could not be accomplished through military force alone. The peaceful exploration of the mountain facility's deeper chambers revealed the full scope of Imperial ambition, suggesting that the Republic faced an adversary whose goals extended far beyond the restoration of the previous regime to the creation of a new form of galactic order based on unprecedented understanding of civilizational psychology. The true architect of the Empire's resurrection revealed himself not through military proclamation or political announcement, but through a single intercepted transmission that shattered every assumption the Republic had maintained about their adversary's identity and capabilities. The message, broadcast on an encrypted Imperial frequency that Republic intelligence had been monitoring for months, contained only a brief tactical update delivered in a voice that spoke basic with the precise articulation of someone for whom it was not a native language. The transmission originated from coordinates deep within the unknown regions, where no Imperial presence should have existed according to Republic intelligence estimates. The speaker identified himself with the simple designation Grand Admiral Thrawn, a title that had been absent from Imperial records since the purges that followed the Emperor's consolidation of power. Yet the authority conveyed in that calm, measured voice suggested someone accustomed to commanding absolute obedience from subordinates. Republic cryptographers working to decode Imperial communications discovered that the enemy's tactical coordination exceeded anything previously achieved by human commanders. Fleet movements across multiple sectors were being synchronized with precision that required either unprecedented levels of communication security or a single strategic mind capable of planning operations spanning vast regions of space simultaneously. Luke Skywalker's force-enhanced meditation during this period provided disturbing insights into the nature of the consciousness directing Imperial operations. The presence he touched through the Force possessed qualities unlike any human mind he had previously encountered. There was an alien quality to its thought patterns, a methodical precision that approached tactical problems with mathematical certainty, rather than the intuitive leaps characteristic of human strategic thinking. The Jedi's visions revealed glimpses of command centers where holographic displays showed not star charts and fleet positions, but artistic representations of galactic cultures analyzed with scientific methodology. The alien consciousness directing these operations viewed warfare as an extension of cultural analysis, treating each engagement as an opportunity to demonstrate superior understanding of enemy psychology through tactical execution. Princess Leia's diplomatic contacts provided additional confirmation of the enemy's non-human identity. Imperial defectors reported serving under a commander whose appearance and mannerisms were distinctly alien, though they described his strategic capabilities in terms that bordered on worship. These reports consistently emphasized the commander's ability to predict Republican tactical responses with accuracy that seemed almost supernatural. The Grand Admiral's tactical methodology, as described by captured Imperial personnel, represented a complete departure from traditional Imperial doctrine. Rather than relying on overwhelming firepower and technological superiority, this new commander achieved victory through superior comprehension of enemy motivations and psychological vulnerabilities. His battle plans incorporated cultural analysis as a primary component of strategic planning. Captain Pellaeon's encrypted communications, decoded by Republic intelligence, revealed the profound impact of serving under alien command. The career Imperial officer described briefings where military objectives were explained through analysis of enemy artwork and cultural traditions. Pellaeon's reports expressed amazement at tactical predictions that proved accurate despite being based on seemingly unrelated cultural observations. The Grand Admiral's command style, as documented in Imperial records, demonstrated fusion of artistic appreciation with military genius that produced strategic insights unavailable to commanders who relied solely on conventional analysis. Thrawn would study holographic representations of enemy cultural artifacts while developing battle plans, explaining tactical decisions through references to artistic styles and aesthetic preferences. Han Solo's investigation of Imperial supply networks revealed purchasing patterns that supported the alien commander's cultural methodology. Imperial agents were acquiring artistic databases, archaeological reports, and anthropological studies at rates that suggested immediate tactical applications rather than academic interest. The scope of these acquisitions indicated systematic preparation for campaigns based on comprehensive cultural understanding. The Republic's growing awareness of their adversary's identity coincided with recognition of tactical innovations that exceeded anything previously demonstrated by Imperial forces. Enemy fleets were executing maneuvers that seemed to anticipate Republican countermeasures before they were even formulated, suggesting strategic planning based on psychological prediction rather than conventional military analysis. Talon Karrde's intelligence network provided confirmation that Imperial forces throughout the galaxy were receiving tactical guidance from a single source whose strategic recommendations demonstrated unprecedented accuracy. Information brokers reported that Imperial commanders were achieving victory ratios that seemed impossible based on their numerical disadvantages and limited resources. The alien Grand Admiral's influence extended beyond tactical innovation to fundamental changes in Imperial organizational structure. Traditional Imperial hierarchy was being modified to accommodate command decisions based on cultural analysis and psychological assessment. Officers were receiving training in anthropological observation and cultural interpretation as components of military education. Republic analysts studying intercepted Imperial communications discovered that fleet commanders were being evaluated based on their ability to implement tactics derived from cultural analysis rather than conventional military metrics. The alien commander's methodology was transforming Imperial forces into an organization that treated cultural knowledge as primary strategic intelligence. Luke's continued force meditation revealed that the enemy's strategic planning operated on temporal scales that exceeded typical military thinking. The alien consciousness directing Imperial operations appeared to be implementing plans that would achieve objectives over decades rather than months, suggesting strategic vision that encompassed the long-term reshaping of galactic civilization. The Grand Admiral's tactical innovations included integration of psychological warfare techniques that exploited specific cultural vulnerabilities of Republican forces. Imperial commanders were receiving detailed briefings on the cultural backgrounds of enemy personnel, enabling them to implement demoralization strategies targeted at individual psychological profiles. Princess Leia's analysis of Imperial propaganda broadcasts revealed sophisticated understanding of Republican political psychology. Enemy communications were crafted to exploit divisions within Republican leadership by referencing cultural conflicts and historical grievances that most Imperial commanders should not have understood. The alien commander's cultural knowledge was being weaponized for political as well as military objectives. The revelation of non-human leadership directing Imperial operations forced Republic strategists to reconsider fundamental assumptions about enemy capabilities and motivations. An alien commander might possess strategic insights unavailable to human tactical thinking, approaching galactic warfare from perspectives that Republican military doctrine had never anticipated. Captain Pellaeon's personal logs, recovered through Republic intelligence operations, described command briefings where the Grand Admiral would analyze captured Republican equipment not for technological advantages, but for cultural information about the civilizations that produced it. Manufacturing techniques, design aesthetics, and engineering philosophy were studied for insights into enemy psychology. The alien commander's strategic philosophy appeared to be based on the principle that comprehensive cultural understanding could predict and counter any military strategy developed by civilizations that created specific forms of artistic expression. This methodology represented transformation of anthropological research into practical warfare applications. Republic forces began encountering Imperial tactics that seemed designed to demonstrate superior cultural knowledge rather than achieve immediate military objectives. Enemy operations included psychological elements that referenced obscure historical events and cultural traditions, suggesting strategic planning informed by comprehensive study of galactic civilization. The Grand Admiral's influence on Imperial forces extended to recruitment and training programs that emphasized cultural sensitivity and anthropological observation as military skills. Traditional Imperial emphasis on technological superiority and overwhelming force was being replaced by doctrine that prioritized understanding enemy psychology through cultural analysis. The discovery of the alien commander's identity provided explanation for Imperial tactical innovations that had previously seemed inexplicable. A non-human strategic mind, unencumbered by human assumptions about warfare and politics, could develop approaches to galactic conflict that exceeded the capabilities of any human commander. The Republic's recognition of their adversary's true nature marked the beginning of a conflict that would challenge every assumption about military leadership, cultural understanding, and the relationship between artistic appreciation and strategic genius. The Empire had found not merely a competent commander, but a tactical innovator whose alien perspective would reshape the fundamental nature of galactic warfare. In the depths of space, Grand Admiral Thrawn continued his methodical preparation for campaigns that would demonstrate the devastating effectiveness of cultural knowledge applied with mathematical precision to the art of war. The deeper implications of Grand Admiral Thrawn's strategic methodology became apparent through an intelligence breakthrough that revealed connections spanning decades of galactic history. Republic analysts, working with data recovered from Mount Tantis and supplemented by information provided by Talon Karday's network, discovered that the alien commander's cultural research had been supported by Imperial institutions since before the Clone Wars, suggesting preparation for galactic campaigns that predated even the Emperor's rise to power. The scope of this preparation exceeded anything previously imagined by Republic leadership. The Thrawn's cultural databases contained analysis of civilizations that had been extinct for centuries, psychological profiles of species that had been absorbed into the Empire generations ago, and strategic assessments of cultural vulnerabilities that could only have been developed through systematic study spanning multiple decades. Luke Skywalker's investigation of recovered Imperial records revealed that the Grand Admiral's methodology represented synthesis of alien strategic thinking with human Imperial doctrine in ways that created entirely new forms of warfare. Thrawn's approach to galactic conflict incorporated perspectives from Chiss military tradition, human imperial efficiency, and comprehensive understanding of galactic cultural diversity that no single individual should have been able to master. The Chiss commander's strategic philosophy appeared to be based on principles that treated galactic civilization as a single comprehensible system whose behavior could be predicted through sufficient cultural analysis. This perspective enabled tactical planning that anticipated enemy responses not through military intelligence, but through psychological understanding derived from artistic and cultural study. Princess Leia's diplomatic analysis of Imperial communications revealed that Thrawn's influence extended beyond military operations to fundamental restructuring of Imperial ideology. Traditional Imperial doctrine emphasizing human superiority was being replaced by methodology that valued cultural diversity as strategic intelligence, suggesting transformation of Imperial goals from species domination to civilizational control through understanding. The Grand Admiral's approach to command demonstrated integration of aesthetic appreciation with tactical planning that created strategic insights unavailable through conventional military analysis. Imperial officers reported receiving tactical guidance derived from analysis of enemy architectural styles, musical traditions, and literary preferences, with these cultural observations being translated into actionable military intelligence. Captain Pellion's detailed communications described command briefings where Thrawn would examine holographic representations of enemy cultural artifacts while developing battle plans, explaining strategic decisions through references to artistic techniques and aesthetic philosophy. The Grand Admiral's tactical innovations emerged from ability to perceive military applications in forms of cultural expression that other commanders would consider irrelevant to warfare. The alien commander's strategic thinking operated on temporal scales that encompassed generational change and cultural evolution rather than immediate military objectives. Thrawn's campaign plans incorporated predictions about how galactic civilizations would develop over decades, suggesting strategic vision that treated current conflicts as components of longer historical processes. Han Solo's investigation of Imperial supply operations revealed that Thrawn's forces were implementing logistics strategies based on cultural analysis of trade relationships and economic preferences. The Grand Admiral's understanding of different species' commercial psychology enabled Imperial forces to disrupt Republican supply lines by exploiting cultural attitudes toward risk, profit, and business relationships. The Republic's growing comprehension of their adversaries' capabilities revealed that Thrawn's cultural methodology was producing strategic advantages in areas beyond direct military confrontation. Imperial forces were achieving objectives through psychological manipulation, economic disruption, and political destabilization based on comprehensive understanding of target civilizations' cultural vulnerabilities. Talon Kada's intelligence network provided evidence that Imperial operations under Thrawn's direction were systematically mapping the cultural foundations of Republican political structure. The Grand Admiral was analyzing the cultural conflicts and historical grievances that influenced Republican leadership, apparently preparing to exploit these divisions for strategic advantage. The alien commander's influence on Imperial doctrine extended to development of recruitment strategies that valued cultural knowledge and anthropological training as military qualifications. Traditional Imperial emphasis on technological education and tactical training was being supplemented by requirements for officers to demonstrate expertise in cultural analysis and psychological assessment. Republic cryptographers decoding Imperial communications discovered that Thrawn's tactical coordination included psychological elements designed to demonstrate superior cultural understanding to both enemy and friendly forces. Imperial operations seemed calculated to showcase the Grand Admiral's ability to predict and counter Republican responses through cultural analysis rather than conventional intelligence gathering. The Grand Admiral's strategic planning incorporated long-term cultural manipulation designed to reshape galactic political relationships in ways that would benefit Imperial objectives. Thrawn's campaigns included elements intended to influence cultural development and political evolution across multiple generations, suggesting goals that extended far beyond immediate military victory. Luke's Force-enhanced meditation revealed that the alien commander's consciousness possessed qualities that enabled perception of galactic civilization as interconnected cultural system rather than collection of independent political entities. This perspective allowed strategic planning that anticipated ripple effects of tactical decisions across multiple species and cultural groups simultaneously. The Chiss Grand Admiral's tactical innovations included development of communication strategies that exploited cultural preferences and linguistic patterns of different species to achieve psychological effects beyond mere information transmission. Imperial propaganda under Thrawn's direction demonstrated sophisticated understanding of how cultural symbols and historical references could influence political opinion and military morale. Republic intelligence analysis revealed that Thrawn's cultural databases included predictive models for how different civilizations would respond to various forms of political and military pressure. These models enabled Imperial planning that anticipated enemy reactions with accuracy that seemed to exceed the capabilities of conventional strategic analysis. The Grand Admiral's approach to warfare represented transformation of cultural anthropology into practical military science through systematic application of alien analytical methodology to human Imperial resources. Thrawn's strategic thinking combined Chiss intellectual tradition with Imperial organizational efficiency to create tactical capabilities that exceeded what either culture could achieve independently. Princess Leia's study of Imperial political communications revealed that Thrawn's influence was reshaping Imperial goals from crude species domination to sophisticated civilizational management based on comprehensive cultural understanding. The alien commander's vision appeared to involve creation of galactic order that preserved cultural diversity while ensuring Imperial political control. The Republic's investigation of Thrawn's methodology revealed that the Grand Admiral's cultural analysis extended to prediction of individual behavior patterns based on cultural background and artistic preferences. Imperial forces were receiving psychological profiles of Republican commanders derived from analysis of their homeworld traditions and personal cultural affiliations. Captain Pellion's intercepted reports described tactical planning sessions where Thrawn would correlate enemy fleet movements with cultural festivals, religious observances, and historical anniversaries, using knowledge of cultural significance to predict when and how Republican forces would respond to Imperial operations. The alien commander's strategic philosophy appeared to incorporate understanding of galactic history as cyclical process of cultural conflict and synthesis, with current military operations being positioned as components of larger historical transformation that would ultimately benefit galactic civilization through Imperial guidance. The Grand Admiral's tactical innovations included development of battlefield communication techniques that used cultural references and artistic symbolism to coordinate Imperial forces while simultaneously demoralizing enemy personnel through demonstration of superior cultural knowledge and psychological understanding. Republic analysts studying Thrawn's methodology discovered that the alien commander's cultural research was being applied to development of long-term Imperial policy that would preserve valuable aspects of galactic civilization while eliminating political structures that challenged Imperial authority. This approach represented synthesis of cultural appreciation with political control that exceeded previous Imperial capabilities. The scope of Thrawn's strategic vision became apparent through recovered Imperial planning documents that outlined campaigns extending decades into the future, with tactical objectives being coordinated with cultural manipulation and political influence operations designed to reshape galactic civilization according to Imperial ideological principles. The Republic's growing understanding of their adversary revealed that Grand Admiral Thrawn represented evolutionary development in Imperial leadership that combined alien strategic perspective with comprehensive understanding of galactic cultural diversity to create tactical capabilities that transcended conventional military limitations. In command centers throughout the unknown regions, the Chiss Grand Admiral continued his methodical preparation for campaigns that would demonstrate the devastating effectiveness of cultural knowledge applied with mathematical precision to the conquest and management of galactic civilization. The convergence of disparate forces against the Imperial resurgence began with an unlikely alliance forged in the shadowed corridors of Carde's smuggling compound on Merkur. The information broker's decision to openly support the Republic marked a fundamental shift in the galactic underworld's approach to the growing conflict, as criminal organizations recognized that Thrawn's systematic methodology posed threats to the chaotic freedom upon which their enterprises depended. Talon Karrde's extensive intelligence network provided the Republic with access to information sources that government agencies could never penetrate. Smugglers, pirates, and black market dealers maintained contacts throughout Imperial space, observing military movements and supply operations from perspectives unavailable to official intelligence services. Their reports painted a detailed picture of Imperial forces operating with coordination that exceeded anything achieved by previous commanders. The criminal underworld's unique vantage point revealed aspects of Thrawn's operations that conventional intelligence gathering had missed. Underworld contacts reported Imperial purchasing agents acquiring cultural artifacts through illegal channels, suggesting that the Grand Admiral's research programs extended beyond legitimate academic sources to include materials obtained through theft, smuggling, and black market transactions. Mara Jade's gradual integration into this emerging alliance represented personal transformation that reflected broader changes occurring throughout the galaxy. The former Emperor's Hand found herself questioning loyalties that had defined her existence since childhood, as exposure to Republic ideals and personal relationships challenged the absolute obedience that had characterized her service to Imperial authority. Her unique background provided invaluable insights into Imperial psychological conditioning and organizational structure that complemented the cultural intelligence being gathered about Thrawn's innovations. Mara's knowledge of Imperial training methods, command protocols, and internal security procedures enabled Republic forces to anticipate enemy responses and exploit weaknesses in traditional Imperial doctrine. The process of sharing information among such diverse allies required development of communication methods that could accommodate the security concerns of criminal organizations while providing Republic forces with actionable intelligence. Karrde's organization established encrypted networks that connected smuggling operations throughout the galaxy, creating information flow that bypassed Imperial surveillance systems. Luke Skywalker's role in coordinating this alliance demonstrated evolution in his understanding of leadership that extended beyond traditional Jedi philosophy. The young knight learned to work with individuals whose motivations and methods differed dramatically from Jedi ideals, recognizing that defeating Thrawn required cooperation among forces that would normally remain antagonistic toward each other. The Jedi's growing appreciation for diverse perspectives reflected broader themes emerging from the conflict with Imperial forces under alien command. Thrawn's success in using cultural diversity as strategic advantage highlighted the limitations of approaches that relied on single ideological frameworks, encouraging Republic leaders to embrace tactical flexibility and intellectual diversity. Princess Leia's diplomatic experience proved essential in managing relationships among allies, whose mutual suspicions often threatened to undermine cooperative efforts. Her ability to find common ground among criminal organizations, military professionals, and idealistic politicians demonstrated the sophisticated understanding of the psychological dynamics that governed intergroup cooperation under stress. The intelligence gathered through this expanded network revealed that Thrawn's cultural methodology was being supported by research teams operating throughout the galaxy under academic and commercial cover. Imperial agents were infiltrating universities, museums, and cultural institutions, gathering anthropological data that was being transmitted to central analysis facilities for tactical application. Han Solo's familiarity with criminal psychology and smuggling operations enabled him to serve as liaison between Republic military forces and underworld organizations that remained suspicious of government authority. His reputation for independence and reliability provided credibility that official diplomatic channels could not achieve, facilitating cooperation that benefited all parties involved. The criminal underworld's contribution to the anti-imperial alliance extended beyond information gathering to include logistical support and strategic deception operations. Smuggling networks provided cover for Republic intelligence activities, while criminal contacts supplied false documentation and identity credentials that enabled covert operations in Imperial-controlled territory. Carter's organization also provided access to financial resources that supplemented Republic military budgets stretched thin by the demands of galactic reconstruction. Criminal enterprises generated revenue streams that could fund intelligence operations and equipment acquisitions without requiring legislative approval or bureaucratic oversight that might compromise security. The Alliance's intelligence sharing revealed patterns in Imperial cultural acquisitions that suggested specific tactical preparations. Thrawn's forces were focusing acquisition efforts on artifacts and cultural materials from species and regions that corresponded to current Republic defensive positions, indicating that the Grand Admiral was preparing campaigns against identified targets. Mara Jade's knowledge of Imperial Palace protocols and court procedures provided insights into how cultural intelligence was being processed and distributed within Thrawn's command structure. Her descriptions of Imperial briefing methods enabled Republic analysts to understand how anthropological data was being translated into tactical guidance for field commanders. The former Emperor's Hand also contributed understanding of force-related Imperial research programs that complemented the technological discoveries made at Mount Tantis. Her knowledge of dark side conditioning techniques and psychological manipulation methods helped Republic forces develop countermeasures against Imperial attempts to exploit individual psychological vulnerabilities. Luke's Jedi training enabled him to perceive emotional and psychological undercurrents within the Alliance that threatened cooperative effectiveness. His ability to sense interpersonal tensions and address them before they disrupted operational coordination proved essential in maintaining unity among diverse groups with conflicting interests and suspicious natures. The intelligence network's discoveries included evidence of Imperial experiments in mass psychological manipulation through cultural media and artistic expression. Thrawn's researchers were developing techniques for using modified cultural artifacts and media broadcasts to influence population psychology on planetary scales, suggesting capabilities that transcended conventional propaganda methods. Republic analysts studying this intelligence recognized that Thrawn's cultural methodology posed threats to galactic civilization that exceeded immediate military concerns. The Grand Admiral's ability to manipulate cultural expression and psychological conditioning could potentially reshape entire societies according to Imperial ideological preferences, creating forms of control that would persist across generations. The Alliance's cooperative efforts revealed that effective resistance to Thrawn's innovations required integration of diverse knowledge sources and tactical approaches that no single organization could provide independently. Criminal networks, military professionals, diplomatic experts, and force-sensitive individuals each contributed unique capabilities that enhanced collective effectiveness against Imperial cultural warfare. Carter's intelligence operations uncovered evidence that Imperial cultural acquisitions included materials from extinct civilizations and lost cultures, suggesting that Thrawn's research extended to historical analysis of failed societies and collapsed political systems. This archaeological approach to cultural intelligence provided the Grand Admiral with understanding of societal vulnerabilities that could be exploited to destabilize current galactic political structures. The criminal underworld's reports also revealed that Imperial forces were conducting systematic psychological profiling of Republic military personnel through analysis of their cultural backgrounds and personal histories. Thrawn's intelligence network was building comprehensive databases of individual psychological characteristics that could be used to predict and manipulate the behavior of specific enemy commanders. Mara Jade's contributions to Alliance intelligence included knowledge of Imperial recruitment and training programs that were being modified to incorporate cultural analysis as standard military education. Traditional Imperial emphasis on technological proficiency and tactical discipline was being expanded to include requirements for anthropological understanding and psychological assessment capabilities. The Alliance's coordinated intelligence gathering revealed that Thrawn's strategic planning incorporated long-term cultural manipulation designed to reshape galactic political relationships over generational timescales. Imperial operations included elements intended to influence educational systems, media content, and artistic expression in ways that would gradually shift public opinion toward acceptance of Imperial authority. Luke's Force-enhanced perception of Alliance dynamics enabled him to identify opportunities for deeper cooperation among groups that might otherwise remain mutually suspicious. His ability to sense shared motivations and common interests beneath surface antagonisms facilitated development of trust relationships that enhanced operational effectiveness. The criminal network's contribution to intelligence operations included access to Imperial personnel who could be approached for information or potential defection. Underworld contacts maintained relationships with Imperial officers and civilian employees who might be persuaded to provide intelligence or actively support anti-Imperial activities. Princess Leia's analysis of intelligence gathered through Alliance networks revealed that Thrawn's cultural methodology was being applied to development of post-conflict governance plans that would preserve beneficial aspects of galactic diversity while ensuring Imperial political control. The Grand Admiral's vision appeared to involve sophisticated management of cultural development rather than crude suppression of non-human traditions. The gathering of wisdom through Alliance cooperation demonstrated that effective resistance to Thrawn's innovations required intellectual and tactical flexibility that matched the Grand Admiral's own adaptive methodology. The diverse knowledge sources and varied perspectives contributed by Alliance members created collective understanding that exceeded what any individual organization could achieve through independent analysis. In hidden bases throughout the galaxy, this unlikely coalition continued coordinating efforts to understand and counter an enemy whose strategic capabilities challenged every assumption about the relationship between cultural knowledge and military power. The ultimate manifestation of Imperial resurrection emerged from the hidden depths of the deep core, where ancient hyperspace routes converged around worlds that had remained secret since the Republic's earliest days. On the shadowed planet of Buz, concealed within gravitational anomalies that made detection nearly impossible, the Empire's most audacious contingency plan reached fruition through technologies that challenged the fundamental laws of life and death. The discovery of the Emperor's survival, preserved through dark side manipulation and sustained by cloning technology that exceeded even the capabilities found at Mount Tantis, shattered every assumption the Republic had maintained about the scope of Imperial preparation. Palpatine's consciousness had been transferred into a succession of clone bodies, each one maintaining the accumulated knowledge and malevolent power that had dominated the galaxy for decades. The clone emperor's existence revealed that Thrawn's cultural methodology was merely one component of a comprehensive strategy that encompassed resurrection technologies, psychological conditioning, and systematic manipulation of galactic history spanning centuries. The Grand Admiral's tactical genius served purposes that extended far beyond military victory to include the fundamental reconstruction of galactic civilization according to Sith philosophical principles. Luke Skywalker's confrontation with this revelation through Force visions that penetrated the dark side veil surrounding Biss provided glimpses of Imperial installations that dwarfed Mount Tantiss in scope and sophistication. The planet housed research facilities, cloning laboratories, and cultural analysis centers that supported operations on scales that encompassed entire galactic regions rather than individual star systems. The Emperor's clone possessed all the memories and accumulated wisdom of his original incarnation, enhanced by decades of preparation for resurrection that had incorporated lessons learned from previous defeats. Palpatine's consciousness had observed the Empire's collapse and analyzed its failures, developing countermeasures and strategic innovations that addressed every weakness that had led to Imperial defeat at Endor. Princess Leia's diplomatic intelligence networks revealed that the clone emperor's influence extended throughout Imperial remnant forces, providing coordination and strategic guidance that transformed fractured warlord territories into components of a unified resurrection campaign. Thrawn's tactical brilliance was being directed by consciousness that possessed intimate knowledge of galactic political psychology accumulated over lifetimes of manipulation. The discovery that Imperial cultural acquisitions had been supporting research into population-scale psychological conditioning revealed the true scope of the enemy's ambitions. The clone emperor's scientists were developing techniques for using cultural manipulation to reshape entire civilizations' belief systems, creating forms of mental slavery that would ensure permanent Imperial dominance without requiring continuous military occupation. Han Solo's investigation of Imperial supply networks uncovered evidence that the Resurrection Project had been funded through financial mechanisms established before the original Emperor's death. Hidden Imperial treasury accounts had continued generating revenue through legitimate business investments, providing resources that supported cloning operations and cultural research programs throughout the years following Endor. The clone emperor's strategic planning incorporated Thrawn's cultural methodology into broader schemes that treated galactic civilization as raw material for reconstruction according to Sith ideological principles. The Grand Admiral's tactical innovations were being applied to campaigns designed not merely to restore Imperial political control but to fundamentally alter the nature of galactic society. Captain Pelian's communications during this period revealed the profound impact of serving under commanders whose goals transcended conventional military objectives. The career Imperial officer described strategic briefings where tactical operations were explained as components of civilizational engineering projects that would reshape galactic culture across generational timescales. The revelation of the Emperor's survival provided explanation for the systematic coordination of Imperial remnant activities that had seemed impossible without central authority. Palpatine's consciousness had been directing the scattered Imperial forces through communication networks that utilized dark side manipulation to ensure absolute loyalty and operational coordination. Mara Jade's unique position as former Emperor's hand provided crucial insights into the psychological conditioning and mental programming that had prepared Imperial agents for participation in resurrection campaigns. Her knowledge of Imperial indoctrination methods revealed how deeply the contingency plans had penetrated Imperial institutional structure. The Clone Emperor's Resurrection Project included development of Force-sensitive clone armies that would combine Thrawn's tactical innovations with dark side powers, enhanced through technological augmentation. These artificial Force users were designed to serve as enforcers for cultural manipulation programs that would operate on psychological levels beyond conventional military capabilities. Republic intelligence analysis revealed that the Emperor's cloning technology incorporated cultural programming that would ensure clone loyalty while preserving tactical flexibility necessary for implementing Thrawn's sophisticated strategic methodologies. Each clone possessed not only Palpatine's memories, but also comprehensive cultural knowledge gathered through the Grand Admiral's research programs. The scope of Imperial resurrection preparations extended to systematic infiltration of Republic political institutions through agents who had been positioned years before Endor. These deep-cover operatives were activating in coordination with military campaigns, providing intelligence and conducting sabotage operations that supported Thrawn's tactical objectives. Luke's Force-enhanced investigation of Imperial operations revealed that the clone Emperor's consciousness retained all the dark side powers of the original Palpatine, while gaining strategic insights from observing the Empire's collapse and subsequent reconstruction. This combination of accumulated power and learned experience created an adversary whose capabilities exceeded even the original Emperor's formidable abilities. The cultural databases assembled through Thrawn's research were being used to develop psychological profiles of entire planetary populations, enabling Imperial forces to implement targeted conditioning programs that would reshape local political loyalties without requiring overt military conquest. These operations represented warfare conducted at levels that affected fundamental aspects of civilizational development. Princess Leia's analysis of Imperial propaganda broadcasts revealed sophisticated psychological manipulation techniques that combined traditional Imperial messaging with cultural references and historical symbolism designed to exploit species-specific psychological vulnerabilities identified through Thrawn's anthropological research. The enemy's information warfare capabilities exceeded anything previously encountered in galactic conflict. The clone Emperor's strategic vision incorporated Thrawn's cultural methodology into long-term plans for galactic governance that would preserve diversity of expression while ensuring uniformity of political loyalty. This approach represented evolution of Imperial ideology from crude species supremacy to sophisticated civilizational management through psychological control. Talon Kardy's intelligence network discovered that Imperial resurrection operations included systematic recruitment of cultural experts, anthropologists, and psychological researchers who were being incorporated into military command structures. Traditional Imperial hierarchy was being modified to accommodate advisory positions for specialists in cultural analysis and population psychology. The revelation that Thrawn's tactical innovations were serving the clone Emperor's broader resurrection strategy provided explanation for operational coordination that had exceeded conventional military capabilities. The Grand Admiral's cultural methodology was being enhanced through dark side manipulation that enabled prediction of enemy behavior with supernatural accuracy. Republic cryptographers analyzing Imperial communications discovered that resurrection campaign coordination included psychological conditioning of Imperial personnel that ensured absolute loyalty while preserving individual initiative necessary for implementing complex cultural manipulation strategies. The enemy's organizational structure combined disciplined obedience with tactical flexibility. The clone Emperor's research programs included development of technologies that could influence galactic media and communication networks to achieve strategic objectives through information manipulation on unprecedented scales. Imperial capabilities for shaping public opinion and political discourse exceeded anything available to Republic government agencies. Luke's confrontation with the magnitude of Imperial resurrection preparations revealed that the Republic faced threats that transcended conventional military conflict to encompass fundamental challenges to galactic civilization's continued existence as a free and diverse society. The enemy's goals involved reconstruction of galactic culture according to principles that would eliminate meaningful resistance to Imperial authority. The discovery of coordination between Thrawn's tactical genius and the clone Emperor's dark side powers created synergy that enhanced both commanders' individual capabilities while producing strategic innovations that neither could have achieved independently. Their collaboration represented fusion of alien analytical methodology with Sith manipulation techniques that challenged every assumption about the limitations of strategic planning. In the depths of space, surrounding hidden Imperial installations, the convergence of cultural analysis, resurrection technology, and dark side manipulation was creating forms of warfare that operated on levels beyond conventional military understanding, threatening to reshape galactic civilization according to visions of order that would preserve diversity of expression while ensuring uniformity of submission to Imperial will. The final confrontation between galactic freedom and Imperial resurrection unfolded not through single decisive battle, but through a series of interconnected conflicts that demonstrated the limitations of even the most sophisticated strategic planning when faced with the unpredictable nature of individual moral choice. The resolution of Thrawn's cultural warfare and the clone Emperor's resurrection ambitions emerged from acts of conscience that transcended the psychological profiles and cultural analysis upon which Imperial strategy depended. The Grand Admiral's downfall began with the rebellion of his own tactical perfection, as the Noghri assassins whose loyalty he had secured through cultural manipulation discovered the true nature of their homeworld's ecological devastation. The revelation that Imperial environmental restoration programs had actually perpetuated the damage they claimed to repair shattered the foundation of trust upon which Thrawn's relationship with the Noghri was built. Leia Organa Solo's discovery of her connection to Darth Vader, when revealed to the Noghri people, transformed their perception of Imperial authority in ways that Thrawn's cultural analysis had not predicted. The alien warriors' decision to transfer their loyalty from the Empire to the daughter of their perceived savior demonstrated how individual revelation could supersede systematic psychological conditioning. The Grand Admiral's final moments aboard the Chimera revealed both the ultimate achievement and fundamental limitation of his strategic methodology. Even as he lay dying from Noghri blade wounds, Thrawn continued analyzing tactical situations and providing strategic guidance to Captain Pellaeon, demonstrating how completely he had integrated cultural understanding with military thinking. Pellaeon's assumption of command following Thrawn's assassination marked the end of an era in Imperial strategic thinking. The human captain, while competent and experienced, lacked his predecessor's unique ability to transform cultural knowledge into tactical advantage. The Grand Admiral's death represented not merely the loss of an individual commander, but the elimination of strategic capabilities that could not be replicated through conventional military education. The collapse of Imperial coordination following Thrawn's death revealed how completely the Resurrection campaign had depended on the Grand Admiral's personal genius for cultural analysis and tactical innovation. Without his unifying vision and analytical capabilities, Imperial remnant forces reverted to the fractured competition between warlords that had characterized the post-Endor period. Luke Skywalker's role in confronting the clone Emperor on Biss demonstrated the evolution of his understanding from individual heroism to recognition of the broader psychological and spiritual forces that shaped galactic civilization. The young Jedi's resistance to dark side temptation represented not personal triumph but affirmation of principles that transcended individual desire for power. The clone Emperor's ultimate defeat emerged from the inherent instability of consciousness, maintained through artificial means rather than natural life processes. Palpatine's attempt to transfer his essence into younger clone bodies created psychological fragmentation that made sustained strategic thinking increasingly difficult, ultimately undermining the systematic planning that had characterized Imperial operations. The destruction of the Emperor's cloning facilities on Biss eliminated the technological foundation that had made Imperial resurrection possible, ensuring that future defeats would be final rather than temporary setbacks in longer campaigns for galactic domination. The loss of resurrection technology returned Imperial strategy to conventional limitations that Republic forces could counter through traditional military means. Mara Jade's liberation from Imperial conditioning represented personal transformation that reflected broader changes occurring throughout galactic civilization as individuals chose personal conscience over institutional loyalty. Her decision to embrace independence rather than serve either Imperial or Republic authority demonstrated the possibility of alternatives to the binary political choices that had dominated galactic conflict. The former Emperor's Han's unique knowledge of Imperial psychological conditioning techniques provided crucial intelligence for developing countermeasures against cultural manipulation programs that had been implemented throughout Imperial-controlled territory. Her insights enabled Republic forces to identify and neutralize conditioning efforts that might have produced long-term political instability. The revelation of Imperial cultural manipulation programs throughout the galaxy forced Republic leadership to reconsider their approach to governance and cultural policy. The discovery that artistic expression and cultural traditions could be weaponized for political control highlighted the need for protective measures that would preserve diversity while preventing exploitation. Han Solo's experiences during the conflict demonstrated how individual integrity and personal relationships could provide resistance to systematic psychological manipulation. His loyalty to family and friends proved more powerful than cultural analysis or political indoctrination, suggesting that human connections transcended the predictable patterns upon which Imperial strategy had relied. The broader implications of Thrawn's tactical innovations continued to influence galactic military thinking even after the Grand Admiral's death. Republic military academies incorporated cultural analysis and psychological assessment into their curricula, recognizing that understanding enemy motivation and cultural background enhanced tactical effectiveness without requiring the moral compromises associated with Imperial methodology. Captain Pellaeon's decision to withdraw Imperial forces from futile campaigns against superior Republic numbers represented recognition that military objectives must be balanced against achievable goals. His more conventional approach to Imperial strategy abandoned Thrawn's ambitious schemes for cultural transformation in favor of preserving existing Imperial territory and personnel. The resolution of Imperial resurrection campaigns revealed that technological advancement and strategic sophistication could not overcome the fundamental human tendency toward moral choice that transcended psychological conditioning and cultural manipulation. Individual decisions to reject authority and embrace personal conscience ultimately proved more powerful than systematic analysis of cultural psychology. Princess Leia's role in coordinating Republic response to Imperial innovations demonstrated how democratic leadership could adapt to new threats while preserving the principles of diversity and freedom that provided moral foundation for political resistance. Her diplomatic approach to alliance building created cooperation that exceeded what could be achieved through coercion or manipulation. The fate of Mount Tantis and other Imperial research facilities revealed the long-term consequences of military strategies based on cultural exploitation and psychological conditioning. The destruction of these installations eliminated capabilities that had taken decades to develop, ensuring that future Imperial resurgence would require different approaches to achieving political objectives. Talon Karrde's organization emerged from the conflict with enhanced understanding of how information networks could serve political purposes beyond mere commercial advantage. The criminal underworld's contribution to defeating Imperial resurrection demonstrated that cooperation between diverse groups could achieve objectives that no single organization could accomplish independently. The resolution of cloning technology issues ensured that artificial resurrection would not continue threatening galactic stability through endless cycles of renewed conflict. The elimination of Sparty cloning cylinders and related technologies returned warfare to conventional limitations where defeat carried permanent consequences rather than temporary setbacks. Luke's continued development as a Jedi reflected broader themes of growth and learning that characterized galactic civilization's response to Imperial innovations. The integration of cultural understanding with moral principle created approaches to conflict resolution that preserved diversity while maintaining ethical standards. The dismantling of Imperial cultural manipulation programs required systematic identification and neutralization of conditioning effects that had been implemented across multiple star systems. Republic forces worked with local populations to restore authentic cultural expression while eliminating artificial influences designed to support Imperial political objectives. The final assessment of Thrawn's strategic legacy revealed both the achievements and limitations of cultural analysis as military methodology. While the Grand Admiral's innovations had demonstrated the tactical value of understanding enemy psychology, his defeat illustrated that human moral choice ultimately transcended predictable cultural patterns. Captain Pellaeon's memoirs, compiled years after the conflict's resolution, provided comprehensive analysis of serving under commanders whose strategic capabilities exceeded conventional military understanding. His writings became essential study materials for military academies throughout the galaxy, ensuring that lessons learned from confronting Imperial innovations would benefit future generations. The peaceful conclusion of Imperial resurrection campaigns allowed galactic civilization to begin healing from decades of conflict while integrating valuable insights gained from confronting enemies whose strategic thinking had challenged every assumption about the relationship between cultural knowledge and political power. In the quiet aftermath of galactic conflict, worlds that had experienced Imperial cultural manipulation began the slow process of rediscovering authentic traditions while preserving beneficial innovations that enhanced rather than exploited their cultural heritage. The galaxy's emergence from the shadow of Imperial resurrection brought transformations that reached into every corner of civilized space, as worlds that had lived under the threat of cultural manipulation began the delicate process of reclaiming their authentic identities. The end of Thrawn's systematic psychological warfare created opportunities for genuine cultural exchange that had been impossible during decades of Imperial exploitation and Republic defensive isolation. On Coruscant, the Senate chambers that had once echoed with debates about military preparedness and defensive strategies now hosted discussions about cultural preservation and educational reform. Representatives from hundreds of worlds shared knowledge that had been hoarded or weaponized during the conflict, creating collaborative projects that celebrated diversity while building mutual understanding between species that had been suspicious of each other's motivations. Princess Leia's transformation from wartime diplomat to peacetime cultural advocate reflected broader changes in galactic leadership as former military commanders and intelligence operatives adapted their skills to reconstruction efforts. Her experience with Imperial manipulation techniques enabled her to identify and counter residual conditioning effects while supporting genuine cultural revival among populations that had been subjected to systematic psychological influence. The New Republic's approach to governance evolved to incorporate lessons learned from confronting enemies who understood cultural psychology better than the civilizations they sought to control. Educational systems throughout Republic territory began teaching cultural analysis and anthropological understanding as essential skills for preventing future exploitation while maintaining the diversity that provided resistance to authoritarian manipulation. Luke Skywalker's role in this transition demonstrated how Force sensitivity could support cultural healing rather than military conflict. His ability to perceive psychological wounds and emotional trauma enabled him to assist communities that had been damaged by Imperial conditioning programs, helping them distinguish between authentic traditions and artificially imposed behavioral patterns. The Jedi's work with populations that had experienced cultural manipulation revealed the profound impact of Thrawn's methodology on individual and collective psychology. Communities that had been subjected to systematic analysis and behavioral modification required careful guidance to rediscover their genuine cultural expressions without rejecting beneficial innovations that had emerged during the period of Imperial influence. Han Solo's transition from military general to civilian explorer reflected personal growth that mirrored galactic society's shift from defensive warfare to creative reconstruction. His experiences during the conflict with Imperial forces had demonstrated the importance of individual integrity and personal relationships in resisting systematic manipulation, lessons that informed his approach to raising children in a galaxy recovering from psychological warfare. The Millennium Falcon's missions during this period carried cultural artifacts and historical documents between worlds that were working to restore connections disrupted by Imperial policies. Han's smuggling experience proved valuable for navigating the complex diplomatic and legal issues involved in returning cultural treasures to their communities of origin while respecting legitimate claims of institutions that had preserved materials during periods of persecution. Mara Jade's journey toward psychological independence provided a template for other former Imperial agents who were struggling to define their identities in a galaxy that no longer valued absolute obedience to central authority. Her transformation from Emperor's hand to independent operator demonstrated that individuals could overcome even the most sophisticated conditioning programs through persistent effort and supportive relationships. The former assassin's unique knowledge of Imperial psychological techniques enabled her to assist Republic counselors and medical personnel who were treating victims of cultural manipulation. Her insights into the methods used to suppress individual conscience and replace personal values with institutional loyalty proved essential for developing therapeutic approaches that could restore psychological autonomy without erasing valuable experiences. Talon Karda's organization evolved from information brokerage to cultural preservation as the criminal underworld recognized opportunities to profit from legitimate activities that supported galactic reconstruction. Smuggling networks that had operated in defiance of Imperial authority found new purposes in facilitating cultural exchange and protecting artifacts from exploitation by opportunistic collectors. The information broker's extensive contacts throughout the galaxy enabled him to coordinate preservation efforts that transcended political boundaries and species divisions. His network provided secure transportation for cultural materials while ensuring that communities received fair compensation for sharing their heritage with academic institutions and museums throughout Republic space. Captain Pelian's leadership of Imperial remnant forces reflected pragmatic acceptance of new galactic realities that made continued warfare counterproductive for achieving legitimate Imperial objectives. His decision to focus on preserving beneficial aspects of Imperial organization and technology, while abandoning aggressive expansion, demonstrated how military professionals could adapt to changed circumstances without abandoning their principles. The Imperial captain's memoirs became valuable resources for understanding how cultural analysis and psychological warfare had been implemented during Thrawn's campaigns. His detailed descriptions of the Grand Admiral's methodology provided insights that helped Republic forces identify and neutralize residual conditioning programs while preserving useful innovations in strategic thinking. The dissolution of Imperial cultural manipulation programs required careful analysis to distinguish between harmful conditioning and beneficial educational innovations. Many worlds had experienced improvements in literacy, technological education, and scientific understanding during Imperial occupation, creating complex challenges for separating positive developments from systematic psychological exploitation. Republic cultural advisors worked with local communities to evaluate Imperial-era changes in educational curricula, artistic expression, and social organization. This process required sophisticated understanding of cultural psychology to identify modifications that enhanced authentic traditions versus alterations designed to support imperial political objectives. The preservation of Thrawn's cultural databases presented ethical dilemmas that reflected broader questions about the appropriate use of knowledge gained through morally questionable methods. The Grand Admiral's research contained valuable insights into galactic anthropology and cultural psychology, but it had been gathered specifically for military exploitation rather than academic understanding. Academic institutions throughout the galaxy engaged in extensive debates about whether imperial cultural research should be preserved for scholarly purposes or destroyed to prevent future misuse. The eventual decision to maintain the databases under strict ethical oversight established precedents for handling knowledge obtained through systematic exploitation of vulnerable populations. The economic implications of transitioning from wartime production to peacetime reconstruction created opportunities for worlds that had been marginalized during imperial rule to contribute their unique capabilities to galactic development. Species that had been valued only for specific military applications discovered that their cultural knowledge and traditional skills had commercial and educational value in peaceful contexts. Trade relationships that had been disrupted by imperial policies and Republic defensive measures were gradually restored as trust developed between communities that had been isolated from each other during decades of conflict. The exchange of goods, services, and cultural knowledge created prosperity that exceeded what any single world could achieve through independent development. The establishment of cultural exchange programs between former enemies demonstrated how shared appreciation for artistic expression and intellectual achievement could transcend political divisions. Academic institutions that had been restricted to species-specific membership began accepting students and faculty from diverse backgrounds, creating collaborative research projects that benefited from multiple perspectives. Museums and cultural centers throughout the galaxy developed exhibition programs that celebrated the diversity of galactic civilization while educating visitors about the methods used to exploit cultural differences for political purposes. These educational efforts were designed to prevent future manipulation by ensuring that populations understood how their cultural expressions could be analyzed and potentially weaponized by hostile forces. The therapeutic treatment of individuals who had been subjected to imperial conditioning required development of new medical and psychological techniques that could address the complex interactions between cultural identity and artificial behavioral modification. Medical professionals learned to work with cultural experts and anthropologists to create treatment approaches that respected authentic traditions while eliminating imposed patterns. Support groups formed throughout the galaxy for individuals who were struggling to distinguish between their genuine preferences and artificially induced behaviors. These organizations provided safe environments where people could explore their authentic cultural identities without fear of judgment or manipulation by others seeking to exploit their vulnerabilities. The gradual restoration of authentic cultural expression created artistic and literary renaissance as suppressed traditions were revived and integrated with innovations that had developed during the period of imperial influence. This cultural flowering produced works that celebrated freedom while incorporating sophisticated understanding of psychological manipulation techniques. Writers, artists, and performers who had experienced both imperial conditioning and liberation created works that explored themes of identity, authenticity, and resistance to psychological control. Their creative expressions provided inspiration for others while serving as documentation of experiences that might otherwise be forgotten. As galactic society moved beyond the trauma of systematic cultural exploitation, the peaceful transition from conflict to reconstruction demonstrated that galactic civilization possessed resilience that exceeded even the most sophisticated attempts at systematic psychological control, as individual moral choice and cultural diversity ultimately proved more powerful than any strategic methodology based on exploitation and manipulation. The restoration of galactic harmony manifested most profoundly in the quiet moments between worlds, where hyperspace routes that had once carried fleets of warships now facilitated pilgrimages of cultural discovery and scholarly exchange. Trade vessels moved through space lanes that had been contested battlegrounds, their cargo holds filled with artistic treasures, historical manuscripts, and scientific knowledge rather than weapons and military supplies. In the outer reaches of the galaxy, where Thrawn's forces had conducted their most extensive cultural research operations, abandoned Imperial installations were being transformed into archaeological sites and research centers. Republic teams worked alongside local populations to catalog and preserve the cultural materials that had been gathered for military purposes, ensuring that knowledge would serve educational rather than exploitative goals. The process of converting Imperial research facilities into collaborative academic institutions required careful consideration of the ethical implications involved in studying cultures that had been systematically analyzed for their strategic vulnerabilities. Scholars from multiple species worked together to develop methodologies that would advance anthropological understanding while respecting the dignity and autonomy of the communities being studied. Luke Skywalker's meditative practices during this period reflected his growing understanding of how the Force connected all living beings through cultural expression and shared creativity. His ability to perceive the emotional resonance of artistic works from different species enabled him to facilitate cultural exchanges that transcended linguistic and conceptual barriers between diverse civilizations. The young Jedi's establishment of informal academies on worlds that had been damaged by Imperial conditioning provided models for educational approaches that celebrated diversity while building mutual understanding. These institutions taught cultural appreciation and psychological awareness as foundations for preventing future exploitation while encouraging creative expression that honored authentic traditions. Students from throughout the galaxy traveled to study at these academies, creating communities where former enemies could learn from each other's perspectives and experiences. The integration of diverse viewpoints and methodologies produced innovations in art, science, and philosophy that exceeded what any single culture could achieve through independent development. Princess Leia's diplomatic initiatives during this period focused on establishing permanent institutions that would preserve the lessons learned from confronting systematic cultural manipulation. Her efforts resulted in the creation of galactic cultural preservation councils and early warning systems designed to identify and counter future attempts at psychological exploitation. The diplomatic protocols developed through her leadership incorporated understanding of cultural psychology that enabled negotiations to address underlying emotional and historical factors that contributed to interspecies conflicts. These approaches proved more effective than traditional diplomatic methods that focused primarily on immediate political and economic interests. Her work with communities that had been subjected to Imperial conditioning revealed the complex relationships between individual identity and cultural belonging that influenced political loyalty and social stability. The insights gained from these experiences informed Republic policies that supported authentic cultural development while maintaining the unity necessary for effective governance. Han Solo's civilian career evolved toward exploration and cultural documentation as he used his piloting skills and underworld contacts to reach isolated communities that had remained hidden during the galactic conflicts. His missions often involved transporting scholars and artists to remote locations where they could study cultural traditions that had been preserved through isolation. The former general's unique combination of technical expertise and cultural sensitivity enabled him to serve as liaison between academic institutions and communities that remained suspicious of outside interest in their traditions. His reputation for honesty and reliability provided credibility that facilitated research relationships while ensuring that local populations retained control over how their cultures were studied and represented. His exploration missions revealed the existence of civilizations that had developed sophisticated understanding of psychological resistance to cultural manipulation through isolation and traditional practices. These communities provided models for maintaining cultural authenticity while engaging with broader galactic society in mutually beneficial ways. Mara Jade's establishment of training programs for individuals recovering from psychological conditioning created networks of support that extended throughout the galaxy. Her personal experience with Imperial indoctrination provided unique insights into the challenges involved in rebuilding authentic identity after systematic manipulation of values and beliefs. The therapeutic techniques she developed combined traditional counseling methods with cultural exploration and artistic expression that enabled individuals to rediscover their genuine preferences and interests. These approaches proved effective for treating not only former Imperial personnel, but also civilian populations that had been subjected to systematic psychological influence. Her work revealed that recovery from cultural manipulation required not only individual therapy, but also community support and opportunities for authentic cultural participation. The programs she established created environments where people could safely explore their identities while contributing to preservation and development of genuine cultural traditions. Talon Kada's transformation from criminal information broker to legitimate cultural preservationist reflected broader changes in how galactic civilization understood the relationship between knowledge and power. His organization's expertise in secure transportation and discreet operations proved valuable for protecting cultural materials and researchers from exploitation by unscrupulous collectors and political opportunists. The former smugglers' network established protocols for ethical cultural exchange that respected community ownership of cultural heritage while facilitating legitimate academic research and artistic collaboration. These systems provided models for balancing preservation needs with accessibility requirements that benefited both scholars and source communities. His coordination of preservation efforts revealed the extent to which Imperial cultural research had disrupted traditional knowledge transmission patterns between generations. Many communities had lost connections to their historical practices and needed assistance in reconstructing authentic traditions while distinguishing them from artificially imposed modifications. The transformation of military intelligence networks into cultural preservation organizations demonstrated how skills developed for warfare could be redirected toward constructive purposes that benefited galactic civilization. Former intelligence operatives used their analytical capabilities and communication expertise to support legitimate research while protecting vulnerable communities from exploitation. Academic institutions throughout the galaxy developed new fields of study that combine traditional anthropology with understanding of psychological manipulation techniques. These disciplines produce scholars who could identify and counter cultural exploitation while advancing legitimate research that enhanced mutual understanding between diverse civilizations. The integration of multiple species perspectives in academic research produced innovations in methodology that exceeded what single-species institutions could achieve. Collaborative projects revealed universal patterns in cultural development while celebrating the unique contributions that each civilization made to galactic knowledge and artistic expression. Museum exhibitions during this period focused on demonstrating how cultural diversity strengthened rather than weakened galactic civilization by providing multiple approaches to solving common challenges. These displays educated visitors about the value of preserving different traditions while showing how cultural exchange could produce beneficial innovations. The development of galactic communication networks dedicated to cultural exchange enabled isolated communities to share their traditions with interested scholars and artists throughout known space. These systems provided secure channels for knowledge transmission while ensuring that source communities retained control over how their cultures were represented and used. Educational curricula throughout Republic space incorporated understanding of cultural psychology and manipulation techniques as essential knowledge for informed citizenship. Students learn to recognize and resist attempts at systematic psychological influence while developing appreciation for authentic cultural expression and diversity. The establishment of cultural monitoring systems enabled early detection of attempts to exploit traditional practices or artistic expressions for political purposes. These networks provided warnings that allowed communities to protect themselves while ensuring that legitimate research and cultural exchange could continue without interference. Artistic communities throughout the galaxy experienced renaissance as suppressed traditions were revived and integrated with innovations that had developed during periods of constraint. This cultural flowering produced works that celebrated freedom and authenticity while incorporating sophisticated understanding of psychological and social dynamics. The peaceful integration of former enemies into collaborative cultural projects demonstrated that shared appreciation for creativity and knowledge could transcend political divisions and historical grievances. These successes provided hope that galactic civilization could maintain unity while preserving the diversity that provided strength and resilience. Meditation centers established on worlds that had experienced cultural manipulation provided environments where individuals could safely explore their authentic spiritual and emotional connections to their heritage. These facilities combined traditional practices with therapeutic techniques that addressed the specific challenges of recovering from systematic conditioning. The development of interspecies artistic collaboration produced cultural works that expressed universal themes while celebrating the unique perspectives that each civilization contributed to galactic understanding. These projects demonstrated how diversity could enhance rather than threaten collective identity and shared values. In the gentle flow of renewed cultural exchange, galactic civilization began to heal from decades of exploitation and manipulation, while building foundations for a future where knowledge and creativity would serve liberation rather than control. The passage of years revealed how the confrontation with Thrawn's strategic genius had fundamentally altered galactic civilization's understanding of knowledge, power, and the delicate balance between unity and diversity that sustained free societies across the stars. The Grand Admiral's legacy lived not in the empire he had sought to restore, but in the deeper appreciation for cultural wisdom that his methods had forced upon those who opposed him. In the halls of the New Republic Senate, legislative sessions now began with moments of reflection on the cultural heritage represented by each member world, acknowledging that the diversity of perspectives and traditions constituted the Republic's greatest strength against future attempts at systematic manipulation. Representatives who had once viewed cultural differences as obstacles to efficient governance now recognized them as essential safeguards against the kind of psychological warfare that Thrawn had perfected. The establishment of the Galactic Institute for Cultural Preservation marked a transformation of the defensive measures that had emerged during the Imperial resurgence into permanent institutions dedicated to protecting and celebrating the diversity that made galactic civilization resilient. The Institute's charter explicitly recognized that cultural knowledge could be weaponized, requiring vigilant protection of traditional practices while encouraging beneficial innovation and exchange. Luke Skywalker's evolution as a teacher reflected his understanding that Jedi training must incorporate appreciation for the cultural contexts that shaped individual students' relationships with the Force. His informal academy had grown into a network of learning centers where Force-sensitive individuals from diverse backgrounds could develop their abilities while maintaining connections to their heritage communities. The Jedi Master's approach to instruction emphasized that strength in the Force emerged from authentic connection to one's cultural identity rather than abandonment of individual background in favor of universal principles. Students learned to draw upon their cultural traditions as sources of wisdom while avoiding the insularity that could make communities vulnerable to manipulation by those who understood their customs better than they understood themselves. His meditation practices during this period revealed how the Force itself had been enriched by the galaxy's increased awareness of cultural diversity and psychological complexity. The cosmic energy that connected all living beings seemed to flow more freely through civilizations that celebrated rather than suppressed the unique contributions of different species and traditions. Princess Leia's role in establishing diplomatic protocols that incorporated cultural psychology reflected her recognition that lasting peace required understanding of the emotional and historical factors that influenced political relationships between different civilizations. Her methods addressed underlying cultural conflicts rather than merely managing their political manifestations. The diplomatic academy she founded trained negotiators to recognize and counter manipulation techniques while developing genuine appreciation for the perspectives and concerns of diverse negotiating partners. Students learned that effective diplomacy required not only political skill but also anthropological understanding and psychological awareness that enabled them to build authentic relationships across cultural boundaries. Her work with communities throughout the galaxy revealed that political stability depended upon cultural authenticity, as populations that maintained strong connections to their traditional practices proved more resistant to destabilization through propaganda and psychological manipulation. The diplomatic approaches she developed supported cultural preservation as a component of galactic security policy. Han Solo's exploration missions had evolved into comprehensive cultural documentation projects that preserved knowledge of traditional practices while recording how different communities had adapted to galactic integration without losing their essential identities. His work provided models for maintaining cultural authenticity while participating in broader galactic civilization. The former general's unique perspective, as someone who had experienced both criminal independence and military service, enabled him to understand how different forms of social organization could provide resistance to systematic manipulation. His documentation efforts revealed that communities with strong internal relationships and clear cultural identities were better able to resist external pressure and maintain their autonomy. His family life with Leia and their children demonstrated how individuals from different cultural backgrounds could build relationships that honored both partners' heritage while creating new traditions that reflected their shared values and experiences. Their example inspired similar integration efforts throughout the galaxy. Mara Jade's development of therapeutic techniques for treating psychological manipulation had led to the establishment of healing centers throughout the galaxy, where individuals and communities could recover from systematic conditioning while rediscovering their authentic cultural connections. Her work revealed that recovery required not only individual therapy, but also community support and opportunities for meaningful cultural participation. The former emperor's hand had become a leading expert in recognizing and countering psychological manipulation techniques, training others to identify the subtle signs of systematic conditioning while preserving the beneficial aspects of cultural innovation and adaptation. Her methods balanced individual healing with community restoration in ways that strengthened rather than fragmented social relationships. Her personal transformation from isolated assassin to community leader demonstrated that even the most sophisticated conditioning could be overcome through persistent effort and supportive relationships. Her example provided hope for others who were struggling to overcome the effects of systematic psychological manipulation. The peaceful evolution of Talon Card's organization from criminal enterprise to cultural preservation network reflected broader changes in how galactic society understood the relationship between legitimate authority and individual freedom. His work demonstrated that cooperation and mutual benefit could achieve objectives that coercion and exploitation could never accomplish sustainably. The former information broker's coordination of preservation efforts had revealed the interconnected nature of galactic cultural heritage, showing how traditional practices and artistic expressions had influenced each other across species boundaries throughout history. This understanding helped communities appreciate their connections to broader galactic civilization while maintaining their unique identities. His establishment of ethical guidelines for cultural research and exchange provided models that balanced academic freedom with respect for community autonomy and cultural ownership. These protocols ensured that knowledge would serve educational rather than exploitative purposes while preserving the rights of communities to control how their traditions were studied and represented. The transformation of former imperial research facilities into collaborative academic institutions demonstrated how infrastructure designed for exploitation could be repurposed to serve beneficial goals. The conversion process required careful attention to ethical considerations while preserving valuable knowledge and technological capabilities. Academic programs developed at these institutions combined traditional anthropological methods with understanding of psychological manipulation techniques, producing scholars who could advance legitimate research while protecting vulnerable communities from exploitation. The integration of multiple species perspectives created innovations in methodology that exceeded what any single culture could achieve independently. The establishment of early warning systems for detecting cultural manipulation demonstrated galactic civilizations' commitment to preventing future exploitation while maintaining the openness necessary for beneficial cultural exchange. These networks provided protection without creating the isolation that could make communities vulnerable to more sophisticated forms of psychological warfare. Educational systems throughout the galaxy incorporated understanding of cultural psychology and manipulation techniques as essential knowledge for informed citizenship, while maintaining appreciation for authentic cultural expression and diversity. Students learn to recognize and resist systematic psychological influence while developing their own cultural identities and creative capabilities. The development of interspecies artistic collaboration had produced cultural renaissance that celebrated both unity and diversity, creating works that expressed universal themes while honoring the unique perspectives that each civilization contributed to galactic understanding. These collaborative projects demonstrated that cultural exchange could enhance rather than threaten individual cultural identities. Museum exhibitions and cultural festivals throughout the galaxy celebrated the diversity that had proved to be civilization's greatest strength against systematic manipulation, while educating participants about the methods used to exploit cultural differences for political purposes. These events built appreciation for cultural heritage while providing knowledge necessary for protecting it from future exploitation. The integration of contemplative practices from multiple traditions created spiritual communities that transcended species boundaries while respecting the authentic practices of each participating culture. These communities provided environments where individuals could explore their relationships with the Force and with galactic civilization while maintaining connections to their heritage traditions. The gradual emergence of galactic cultural identity that encompassed rather than replaced individual cultural traditions demonstrated that unity and diversity could coexist and mutually enhance each other when based on genuine understanding and respect rather than imposed uniformity or competitive separation. In the gentle rhythms of renewed cultural exchange and creative collaboration, galactic civilization had found wisdom that transcended the strategic insights of even its most formidable enemies, discovering that authentic diversity provided strength that no systematic analysis could fully comprehend or successfully exploit for destructive purposes. The eternal cycle of challenge and growth continued as communities throughout the galaxy maintained vigilance against future threats, while celebrating the cultural richness that made their civilization worth defending, ensuring that knowledge would serve liberation rather than control across generations yet to come. In the vast expanse of space, where countless stars cast their ancient light across civilizations that had learned to treasure both unity and diversity, the galaxy settled into a profound tranquility that reflected not the absence of challenge, but the presence of wisdom earned through confronting the deepest threats to freedom and authenticity. The lessons learned from facing Grand Admiral Thrawn's strategic brilliance had become woven into the fabric of galactic consciousness, creating understanding that would guide future generations through whatever trials awaited among the stars. The New Republic's government chambers, once filled with urgent debates about military preparedness and defensive strategies, now hosted quiet ceremonies where representatives from hundreds of worlds shared the cultural treasures that had been preserved through decades of conflict and reconstruction. These gatherings celebrated not victory over enemies, but the deeper triumph of maintaining diversity and authenticity, despite systematic attempts to exploit cultural knowledge for purposes of domination and control. In the soft glow of holographic displays showing artistic masterpieces from across the galaxy, senators and diplomats found peace in contemplating the beauty that their civilizations had created, rather than the weapons they had been forced to wield. The transformation of political discourse from crisis management to cultural celebration marked the fulfillment of ideals that had sustained resistance movements through the darkest periods of imperial oppression. Luke Skywalker's meditation chambers had become places of pilgrimage for individuals seeking to understand how personal growth and cultural authenticity could coexist with galactic citizenship and cosmic responsibility. The Jedi Master's teachings emphasized that strength in the Force emerged not from abandoning individual heritage, but from integrating cultural wisdom with universal principles of compassion and justice. Students who traveled from distant worlds to study at his academies discovered that their unique cultural perspectives enriched rather than complicated their connection to the cosmic energy that bound all living beings together. The diversity of traditions and practices represented in these learning communities created harmonies that reflected the galaxy's own beautiful complexity, while demonstrating that differences could strengthen rather than threaten collective purpose. The gentle rhythms of instruction and contemplation that characterized these academies provided models for educational approaches that celebrated individual cultural identity while building understanding across species boundaries. Students learned that their heritage traditions contained wisdom that could benefit not only their own communities, but also the broader galactic civilization of which they were part. Princess Leia's diplomatic legacy lived on in institutions that approached interspecies relationships with appreciation for the cultural psychology and historical experiences that shaped each civilization's worldview and political preferences. The negotiation techniques developed through her leadership created lasting frameworks for resolving conflicts through understanding rather than coercion or manipulation. The peaceful resolution of disputes that might once have led to warfare demonstrated that systematic cultural understanding could serve cooperation and mutual benefit rather than exploitation and dominance. Diplomatic academies throughout the galaxy taught students to recognize and address the emotional and historical factors that influenced political relationships while building authentic connections across cultural boundaries. Her work with communities recovering from imperial conditioning had revealed that healing required not only individual therapy, but also restoration of cultural practices and social relationships that provided meaning and identity. The therapeutic approaches developed through her initiatives created environments where people could safely explore their authentic selves while contributing to the preservation and development of their heritage traditions. Han Solo's exploration and documentation missions had evolved into family traditions as his children accompanied him on journeys to remote worlds where isolated communities maintained practices that connected them to the galaxy's ancient cultural heritage. These expeditions provided opportunities for young people to appreciate the diversity of galactic civilization while understanding their own place within its vast tapestry. The former general's documentation of traditional practices and adaptive innovations created archives that preserved knowledge for future generations, while demonstrating how cultures could maintain their essential identities while participating in broader galactic development. His work revealed that authenticity and integration could coexist when based on mutual respect and genuine understanding. His family's experiences traveling throughout the galaxy provided examples of how individuals from different cultural backgrounds could build relationships that honored all participants' heritage while creating new traditions that reflected shared values and experiences. Their story inspired similar integration efforts in communities throughout known space. Mara Jade's healing centers had become sanctuaries where individuals and communities could recover from psychological manipulation while rediscovering their connections to authentic cultural traditions and meaningful social relationships. The therapeutic techniques she had developed balanced individual healing with community restoration in ways that strengthened social bonds rather than fragmenting them. The former Emperor's hand had dedicated her life to helping others overcome the effects of systematic conditioning while building resistance to future manipulation through cultural awareness and psychological education. Her work demonstrated that even the most sophisticated attempts at mental control could be overcome through persistent effort and supportive community relationships. Her transformation from isolated assassin to community healer provided hope for anyone struggling to overcome traumatic experiences or artificial behavioral conditioning. Her example showed that authentic healing required not only individual effort, but also community support and opportunities for meaningful participation in cultural preservation and development. The peaceful evolution of Talon Kardi's organization into a network dedicated to cultural preservation and ethical exchange had created models for how commercial enterprises could serve beneficial social purposes while maintaining economic viability. His coordination of preservation efforts demonstrated that cooperation and mutual benefit could achieve sustainable results that coercion and exploitation could never accomplish. The former information broker's establishment of ethical guidelines for cultural research and exchange had protected vulnerable communities from exploitation while facilitating legitimate scholarship and artistic collaboration. These protocols ensured that knowledge would serve educational and creative purposes rather than manipulation and control. His work had revealed the interconnected nature of galactic cultural heritage, showing how traditional practices and artistic expressions had influenced each other across species boundaries throughout history. This understanding helped communities appreciate their connections to broader civilization while maintaining their unique contributions to galactic diversity. Throughout the galaxy, institutions that had once served military or exploitative purposes had been transformed into centers for learning, healing, and cultural celebration. Former Imperial research facilities housed collaborative academic programs where scholars from multiple species worked together to advance understanding while respecting the dignity and autonomy of the communities they studied. Museums and cultural centers displayed artistic treasures that had been preserved through decades of conflict, presenting them not as curiosities or strategic intelligence, but as expressions of the creativity and wisdom that made galactic civilization worth defending. These exhibitions educated visitors about cultural diversity while building appreciation for the beauty and insight that emerged from authentic creative expression. Educational systems throughout Republic space incorporated understanding of cultural psychology and appreciation for diversity as essential components of citizenship preparation, while maintaining respect for individual heritage and community autonomy. Students learn to recognize and resist manipulation while developing their own cultural identities and creative capabilities. The development of interspecies artistic collaboration had produced works that expressed universal themes while celebrating the unique perspectives that each civilization contributed to galactic understanding. These collaborative projects demonstrated that cultural exchange could enhance rather than threaten individual cultural identities when based on genuine respect and mutual appreciation. In the quiet spaces between worlds, where hyperspace routes carried travelers seeking knowledge and cultural exchange rather than conquest and exploitation, the galaxy had found a peace that transcended mere absence of conflict to embrace active celebration of the diversity that provided strength and resilience against future challenges. The gentle flow of trade vessels carrying artistic treasures and scholarly materials rather than weapons and military supplies marked the transformation of galactic civilization from defensive survival to creative flourishing. Communities that had once feared cultural exchange as potential vulnerability now welcomed opportunities to share their traditions while learning from others. As the stars continued their ancient dance across the cosmic void, civilizations throughout the galaxy maintained their vigilance against future threats while celebrating the cultural richness that made their society worth protecting. The lessons learned from confronting systematic manipulation had become integrated into educational curricula, diplomatic protocols, and cultural practices that would guide future generations. In meditation chambers and cultural centers, classrooms and diplomatic halls, the wisdom gained through confronting the galaxy's most sophisticated enemies had become foundation for approaches to knowledge and power that served liberation rather than control. The eternal cycle of challenge and growth continued with deeper understanding of how diversity and unity could coexist and strengthen each other across the vast reaches of space and time. The peaceful conclusion of this great trial had demonstrated that galactic civilization possessed resilience and wisdom that exceeded even the most brilliant strategic analysis, as the authentic connections between diverse cultures proved more powerful than any systematic attempt to exploit their differences for purposes of domination and control.